And we're live. Welcome to Josh and Aaron Talk About Stuff. I am Josh.
I am Aaron.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us. This week, we're going to be talking about the women of rock
The ladies of
from
rock
the
and roll.
60s to 90s, maybe today.
Yeah. We'll see how far we get.
Real quick before we get into that, I did watch Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Oh, what'd you think?
It was amazing. It was 4 hours.
But
see, nobody complained about Endgame for the Avengers being that long.
No,
3 hours.
No, or the Lord of the Rings.
It was.
It was like 3.5.
It was awesome. It was awesome.
That's awesome.
Really
I'll have to. I want to see it. I don't have HBO Max right now.
Yeah.
So you have a guest with you today.
This is the most spoiled specialist dog ever. His mom is not with us. Well, she's gone at the moment.
He will be providing talking points.
Yeah, but so otherwise he wouldn't be with me. He's totally a mama's dog. But so this week, guys, we're going to be, I said it, talking about the women of rock. And I apologize now to any women who I forget or leave off the list of the women of rock, because there's a lot. And I just don't know, through many reasons, I just don't know all of them. And that doesn't mean that they're not there and they're not awesome at what they do.
Right.
This is just our perspective, our reality, our truth.
Yeah, right. Which is actually part of the reason. Which is actually part of the reason I wanted to talk about it. Right. I think part of the reason I wanted to talk about it, and part of the reason I felt like it was worth talking about, was because neither of us, for one reason or another, have maybe the perspective on it that we should.
Yep. And
it's important that we maybe do a little talking about it, thinking about it, researching on it, and gain some perspective on these women that have influenced the genre that we love. Because let's face it, you and I are rock fans. That's just what we like. And I mean, I'll throw the occasional hip hop song on, but it's pretty rare, and the occasional pop song on, but we're rock guys, and there are a lot of women that have influenced a lot of rock. And this is kind of a topic that came up at my suggestion, and I'll jump right into the reason.
Can I pause you for 1 second?
Please do.
Okay. So I think we should define, or try to, between us, what is it to mean to make music that is rock and roll? Because there's an umbrella of all these different, like, thrash metal does that still fall under the umbrella of rock and roll? But this is also going to come into when we talk about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame later in the season. But like,
or when we talk about the women of the 80s who we might not be talking about today, people like Madonna and Paula Abdul, who I think we really consider more like pop artists.
So like, what comes to you, your emotion or thoughts when you hear the word rock and roll? What does that mean to you?
I instantly think band. You know what I mean? Like I instantly think I think band, I think live musicians, I think instruments being played. The immediate thing is the trio. This is the great trilogy of instruments, right? The great triumvirate: the guitar, the bass, the guitar, bass, drums. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean you have to have those for it to be rock. It's just that's just like my immediate. You asked what my immediate gut reaction is. That's it.
Because that makes me think of like, well, jazz musicians have all that, but it's not rock.
Right.
So what gives it that rock to you? What makes it rock and roll for you versus like pop?
Right.
Or
maybe it's that origination of from blues,
Yep.
That it's got that bluesy, that's the heart of it. I mean, and honestly, one of the first ladies that pops into my mind when you say women of rock is Janis Joplin, right? I mean,
absolutely. I mean, she's I've been struggling a lot. Like, I've done a lot of research on women of rock, and like, she's probably like, if you want to get down to it, for like rock and roll, what it embodies, she's
taking a little piece of my heart. It's just
she's the originator.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as like rock and roll, because there are a lot of women in the 60s that probably fell under the umbrella of rock and roll as it was being like created and moving forward. Because like I think we talked like Aretha Franklin.
Oh my god,
kind of rock and roll.
She's kind of
but like that Motown rock and roll thing going on.
Like so at her heart, Aretha is rock and roll, man, because it's like because a part of it is also the attitude, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
like,
isn't part
respect me? You know what I'm saying? R-E-S-P-C-T, baby.
Respect me, isn't that a part of what rock and roll is all about? It's that okay, so I'm gonna like my Pearl Jam thing for the day. I was listening to the song Corduroy by Pearl Jam, and
Right.
believe me, this has actually got a point. And that song is like so like anti the industry, you know. Take my sell my T-shirt. You know, it's like that's rock and roll, right? And so you look at something like Aretha Franklin. In a way, she's rock and roll, man. That's like because that's what rock and roll is.
It's not just about the sound; it's about the attitude, the message,
Respect me.
Like, yeah, but that
and it can never be political because we don't want politics in rock and roll, right?
We of course that why would we do that? It's funny though. Like we've talked about that many times before. Of course, the famous example, Rage Against the Machine. A lot of rock
I liked
and
it
roll.
Until they got political.
Yeah, no, a lot of rock and roll is political. Like just in music in general in the '60s,
it's political,
hugely political. But but people hardly ever look at the lyrics. It's about that. That's that cleverness of the melody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But Janis Joplin, her voice. Just singing, her singing ability, belting it out.
Yeah, very just like that.
She was a rocker,
dude. She was a rocker straight to the core.
And I looked up at influences, and there's it led me to more and more and more. She influenced a generation of women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and yeah.
So do we put in? So as we talk about these women of rock and roll, then do we talk about people like Karen Carpenter? The Carpenters actually. Yeah, but I mean,
I know
she was. If you ever watched her drum. She was an amazing drummer. Like you should check out video of Karen Carpenter drumming. She was a fantastic drummer, So you have the Carpenters who they had soft and poppy, but she was back there playing drums, and and she was fantastic. Or what about the Mamas and the Papas and
Well, I just thought about that. That doesn't seem rock and roll to me.
But maybe for the era,
right?
Was that rock for the era?
Well, I have to hold it up to, I guess, Beatles, Rolling Stones, and Janis Joplin, and maybe Aretha Franklin. Is it the same?
Right.
Rock and roll is just one of those genres that's really hard to define because.
And maybe that's why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is so broad, and we'll talk about that in a couple.
That episode, guys, is going to be more me bashing them of the stuff that they've got all got.
Me
wrong.
Sitting here nodding. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know, but So Janis Joplin, I'm going to say Aretha Franklin. She definitely embodied the essence of what rock and roll was in her own Motown way, right? Which is amazing music. I love it.
Right.
So I feel she was on the list of rock and roll. A lot of women I had never heard of actually.
I would absolutely say Joni Mitchell is.
She was Paved Paradise, right? What was it called?
Big
Yellow Taxi. But
Big Yellow Taxi, yeah.
Maybe the message, but I don't know if the music reverberates rock and roll for me because I guess it can be both.
But then I guess I would ask you: would you consider Elton John or Billy Joel rock and roll? Because if you look at them and say they're rock and roll, then Joni Mitchell's rock and roll because she's really.
I guess that's my ignorance if I don't know that much of. I mean, I looked up Joni Mitchell recently. I mean, that's her big song, but
right.
I guess rock and roll could be because there's a lot of rock music with songs that make no sense at all that don't have any message, but you would still call it rock. Then you have the message.
Mr. Jones and me.
I know. Is it a jab?
Sorry, County Cross fans.
They're rock light,
Yeah, right.
But so what was the other band we were talking about? Oh, you said it was Elton John or Billy Joel.
Right,
so they would, I guess, fall under the umbrella of just rock and roll, which has a million different genres, subgenres in it. I would think, and they have some songs that are pretty rocking.
Yeah.
But I would put them more on the lighter side.
But that's where I put Joni Mitchell too.
Which is okay. So I mean,
I think she's a super talented lady, and she was rock, man, and she wrote her songs, she played her instrument. I mean, to me, that's where you start to get into the heart of rock and roll, and these are the women I think that influenced then other musicians, male and female, and influenced musicians as we moved into the 70s, and you started to get, and then in the 70s you started to get bands like, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, and the Runaways.
Sorry, dogs barking. Well, weren't they more late 70s going into the 80s?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I feel so of course there's Fleetwood Mac, right, in the 70s, which we both don't like, but whatever. Stevie Nicks is a rock and roller.
You got to acknowledge. I mean, if nothing else, the fact that Dave Grohl loves Stevie Nicks makes me have to respect Stevie
right.
Nicks.
But I feel like there's like a drought in the 70s of women of rock.
Yeah, kind of feels that way.
And like why? Yeah, why is that, right?
I think perhaps that's the biggest. That was actually, and that was kind of the question that I wanted to pose, and kind of my big thought. Why is it that it is a genre of music that, in terms of the musicians, sort of like became so male focused? You know, I mean, because I think it just sort of did. I mean, not to take away from the women that were out there playing the music, but the media, perhaps the media focused in on it. Perhaps it's just
even the
who was
record
making
companies are male dominated, right? And
absolutely. Yeah.
Treated women like this is what you're saying.
Yeah. True enough.
It was very few that were able to like break the mold and like have more bargaining power. But like it just seems like, for me, because I don't know that many, but like as far as like women of rock in the 70s, seems like there's kind of like a drought to like the late 70s where they start to make a name for themselves, kind of like you said, Joan Jett, and then like you got Pat Benatar, who would no one to, I don't think anyone would dispute that they were women of rock. But maybe it's like that male dominated industry where it's like women would have to work twice as hard to get half the credit.
Yeah.
And of course, if the industry doesn't think that it can make money off of you, they're not going to give you that shot, right?
Right. Because that's what, I mean, let's face it, the record industry is. So, like, the Grammys were on the other day.
They were?
No, exactly. It was like the lowest watched ever Grammys, and it's just sort of brought to the mindset of how, I mean, like, just how out of touch and kind of corrupt the music industry is, and I think maybe that's what that's what a lot of these women have probably dealt with. But that doesn't take away from the fact that, as you moved into the 80s, there were bands out there like Joan Jett, and who is, I think, in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the Runaways and Pat Benatar and Heart, who I'm not a fan of Heart particularly.
I like 70s Heart.
Yeah,
then the 80s Lightning Up. Yeah,
Heart was definitely a super influential band.
You mentioned Blondie.
I love Blondie and Debbie Harry. They definitely were like trying to catch on to that New York punk scene, like with
Pretenders.
The Pretenders with Chrissie Hynde. Yeah, absolutely. So there were definitely these bands that were out there and were performing, and then I think when we hit the 90s, the door sort of opened.
Right. Would you mean, Cher, she's a rocker, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think she would fall under that umbrella.
Yeah.
If I could turn back time.
Sing it, buddy. Sing it. And then we got into the 90s. I think the door just sort of opened for what it could do, for what bands could do and what female artists could do, and whether they were performing with a band or were the entire band or a bulk of the band. It was a much more like the scene just sort of opened. And then, I mean, you could name off countless, and again, so this is, and honestly, that is what led me to this topic, was listening to one of the bands in the 90s, and I was listening to the Cranberries.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to the Cranberries, and Dolores has got this voice that is like absolutely like ethereal, fantastic voice. And even if you only know like there are a couple of big singles, Linger and Zombie, they were super, super great band and really influential, and her death was really tragic. And honestly, like, they're one of the few bands of the 90s at this point. There's the song Zombie is one of the few videos from bands of the 90s that actually has like 1 billion views on YouTube.
1 billion?
Has over 1 billion views. Zombie has over 1 billion views on YouTube, along with like November Rain.
Is it kind of like a Sunday Bloody Sunday song like U2?
It's very much a Sunday Bloody,
because they're Irish.
Yeah, no, they are. They're Irish. They're from Limerick, I think is what I read. And I was looking at the other day. They're from Limerick, Ireland. And it's founded by a pair of brothers whose last name was Hogan.
Oh yeah, all right. Yeah, but I thought you were more on the Scott. Now you're Irish side, right? Not
Irish,
Scottish. You look more Scottish.
Think so?
I don't know. What do I know? What do I know? Right. Like I can tell the difference between a Scotch and an Irish.
Yeah, but no, but they were definitely. I was listening to them, and they were that song is really powerful. And then it is like you said, it is sort of a Sunday Bloody Sunday thing,
where song, yeah. Where and it is their tanks and their bombs
and their bombs and their guns. Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned so I was like, all right, so 90s really that's really the era that we're most comfortable talking with. Because I was like, no doubt they were a rock band. I would
absolutely
agree. They moved more like ska-ish.
Yeah, but they were definitely a rock band. They were
still a rock band. I was thinking I know. I'm trying to remember what bands do I know that are led by women. Veruca Salt. They kind of go Luscious Jackson.
Luscious Jackson. Breeders.
It's funny with the Breeders though.
And so the Breeders is actually. Go ahead, man. What you gonna say?
She's Kim Deal, right?
Of the Pixies.
So yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's huge because the Pixies obviously are. I mean, Nirvana, Kurt, frequently cited the Pixies as a major influence on the way songs.
Yeah, Pixies along with The Cure are like the original alternative bands that really was a very big influence on everyone else. Because like the Pixies. Oh, my little buddy's moving here. Say hey. There he is.
Hey, buddy.
They were like ahead of their time as far as the way that they constructed their songs and their lyrics and the music, and they had cult following. I don't think they were ever huge, but yet most huge bands are like, oh yeah, the Pixies, and
I love the Pixies.
The Cure,
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's the women are there. It's just,
and they are, and go ahead. They're even there in the Seattle grunge scene, and they were one of the most overlooked bands. And I encourage you to go listen after we're done today, and I will do the same because I haven't listened to a lot of their stuff. A band called L7, and a lot of people think that they were one of the best bands to come out of the Seattle era. It's just that it was female led, and did they get ignored because of that? That's no.
Well, it also could just be exposure.
Yeah,
true enough. Not getting the videos made.
Right.
And it could be locally, amazing, but it's hard to be nationally known.
Yeah, it is. It is.
But
and now you have another buddy.
Oh, well, that's the same one. He just went around me, but
no, you had there was a larger.
Oh, they're right here. The poodles.
Yeah.
So yeah, the women of rock deserve more recognition, and they deserve a place. But even now though, in the umbrella of rock, there's very few bands that are really get the recognition or the exposure that they probably deserve.
Yeah, I mean, rock is music, Yeah, rock is sort of.
You think it's too diluted now?
I don't even know. And that's a question for next time. What is going on with rock? Not just for, not just for men. I mean, not just for women, but for men as well. The rock scene has sort of something's happened to it.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I wrote some names down for other bands like Grace Slick from Jefferson Airplane.
Absolutely.
They were a pretty rocking band. Patti Smith. Yeah, and then in the 90s, we got
shout out to my girl Meg White of the White Stripes.
Yep. Hole. You mentioned Hole before.
Absolutely. I'm not a
rock bands.
I'm not a huge fan, but they're they were undeniably influential and popular at the time.
Yep.
And honestly, I think part of the reason I'm not a fan is because, just gonna say it, Courtney is hard for me to
right.
And
yeah, absolutely. I wrote down.
The band itself wrote some cool songs.
Yep. Celebrity Skin was their big hit. I wrote down. You mentioned it before, Alanis Morissette.
Absolutely.
I think she would be a rocker.
Yep. I definitely think Alanis fits into the alternative rock arena.
And then I wrote down Sheryl Crow.
Agreed.
I think her first song wasn't really rock and roll. All I want to do is have some fun, but that's what she had. If It Makes You Happy was pretty rocking.
Yeah, or what about Sarah McLachlan? I
wouldn't call her a rock and roller. No. I don't know. That seems that's more folksy to me.
But I will tell you this: Sarah McLachlan is the one who was behind Lilith Fair, and Lilith Fair was really a big thing for getting women artists out there. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Liz Fair, who is a rocker to the core. And she was like the riot girl of the early '90s, and I love Liz Fair. Liz
I know the name. I couldn't pick out a song right now, but I'm sure I've heard.
And she kind of, in a way, for me, sadly, kind of went the way of like Gwen Stefani, where at the start it was rock at the start, and then it kind of transitioned sadly over to this pop thing. Yeah. And it's like, was the pop thing her, or was the pop thing the label going, hey, what if you did this? Who's to say, But like her first couple of albums were definitely pure rock. Liz Fair was fantastic.
As far as like contemporary acts, I really don't. Alabama Shakes, I think, that's led by a female, a lady who has got some.
Her voice is like, first time I heard her, I was like, wow, Janis Joplin has been reborn.
I mean, they have pretty cool style. And then Florence and the Machine.
Man, I
like them.
Dude, Florence and the Machine are fantastic. I love Florence.
I mean, first off, if you name yourself as your stage name is The Machine, that's pretty rocking.
Right?
You have Florence, you have band, The Machine. It's pretty rocking.
Right? It's pretty great. I mean, the fact that she has a song called "Kiss with a Fist."
Yeah.
I mean, that's rock and roll. Because a kiss with the fist is better than none.
Yep.
That's pretty rock and roll right at its heart. So I love her. And that brings us, are we out of time for the day?
We're coming up on being out of time, but any last thoughts?
So maybe I'll pose this one and we can talk about it next time.
Okay.
Because honestly, this is where I think where it's going.
Okay.
About Billie Eilish.
Well, we mentioned, I think it was in the recording for last week because we're going to talk about contemporary music near the end of the season, but like, because we said like Beatles changed music, then Nirvana changed music, and we were kind of like in need for a new change. I said, I think The Weeknd, the more I listen to him, the more I'm like, oh man, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think Billie Eilish is like the top female act right now. Absolutely. Now, as far as like rock and roll, I think, she talks about some real dark stuff, which I think is important. Which is one of the reasons why I love Third Eye Blind. Stephen Jenkins is just like, he tells a more real story, not afraid to talk about real life stuff. But I think Billie Eilish is like, she's probably a rock and roller, even though it doesn't have to, because a lot of her stuff is like electronic sounds. But I think Nine Inch Nails is a rock and roller.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff is synthesizers, right? It's not just the equipment used; it's the style, it's the message. And I think I would put Billie Eilish as like rock and roll. But we can talk more about her later, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's all the time we have today, kiddies, and little special guest back there. He liked it. So yeah, tune in next week, or not next week, but later this week for part 2 of the Women of Rock discussion, and we'll see you later. Make sure you subscribe, leave comments if you want. Maybe we'll talk about a topic in the future if you leave us what you want us to talk about later down the line. But see you later.